Sarah stood between two choices. First choice, watch her daughter die. Second choice, trust a formula written by a homeless man. The logical choice, first. The impossible choice, second. But sometimes logic isn't enough. Sometimes you have to believe in impossible things. And Sarah was about to learn that the homeless man wasn't just anyone. But before we dive into this story, hit that like button and subscribe. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from, and how old are you? Dr. Sarah Mitchell was a good doctor. No, she was an exceptional doctor. At 41, she'd spent 15 years as a pediatric oncologist at Children's Memorial Hospital. She'd saved hundreds of children, walked families through the darkest moments of their lives, and brought them back into the light. Parents sent her Christmas cards years after their children went into remission. She had a wall in her office covered with photos. Smiling kids, graduation pictures, wedding invitations, proof that her work mattered. But none of that prepared her for the day her own daughter was diagnosed. Lily was 9 years old. Brown hair, bright eyes, a laugh that could fill a room. She'd complained about stomach pain for 2 weeks. Sarah had thought it was nothing. Maybe stress from school. Maybe she'd eaten something bad. But when the pain didn't go away, Sarah took her in for tests. The results came back on a Tuesday afternoon. Sarah was in her office when her phone rang. It was Dr. Marcus Chen, her colleague in pathology. His voice was quiet. "Sarah, you need to come down here." She knew. Before he said anything else, she knew. The biopsy showed neuroblastoma. Stage 4. Aggressive. Rare. The kind of cancer that appeared in medical textbooks as examples of what couldn't be cured. Sarah had seen this diagnosis before. She'd sat across from parents and delivered the news with compassion and professionalism. Explained treatment options, survival rates, clinical trials. Now she was the parent sitting in the chair. "How long?" she asked Marcus. He looked down at the report. "Without treatment, maybe 2 months. With aggressive chemotherapy, we might buy 6 to 8 months. Maybe a year if we're very lucky. And after that?" Marcus didn't answer. He didn't have to. Sarah went through the motions. Started Lily on chemotherapy, the strongest protocol available. Lily's hair fell out. She lost weight, stopped eating, spent days in bed too weak to stand. But the tumors kept growing. The cancer spread to her bones, her liver, her lungs. 3 months passed. Then 4. The oncology team held meetings, reviewed scans, adjusted dosages. Nothing worked. The cancer was too aggressive, too resistant. 1 by 1, Sarah's colleagues stopped making eye contact with her in the hallways. They knew what she knew. They were running out of time. What Sarah didn't know was that someone else had been watching. The hospital had a small courtyard, a forgotten space behind the west wing where staff rarely went. A few benches, overgrown bushes, a broken fountain that hadn't worked in years. And in the corner, sitting on a bench every day, was a man most people walked past without seeing. His name was Dr. Robert Hayes. Or it used to be. Now he was just the homeless guy who slept in the courtyard. Security had tried to remove him a few times, but he always came back. Eventually they stopped trying. He wasn't hurting anyone, just sitting, watching, remembering. Robert was 58 years old. 15 years ago, he'd been the lead biochemist at Helix Pharmaceuticals, one of the largest drug companies in the country. He'd spent 20 years researching rare cancers, developing treatments, saving lives. Then he'd made a mistake. Or rather, He'd refused to make one. The company had pressured him to falsify trial data, to approve a drug that hadn't been properly tested. The profits would be enormous, they said. The risks were minimal. But Robert had seen the data, seen the side effects that were being buried, seen the patients who'd gotten worse, not bettered. He'd refused. Said he'd go public if they released the drug. 2 weeks later, he was fired, accused of scientific misconduct, falsifying his own research. The company had powerful lawyers. They destroyed his reputation, his career, his life. No other pharmaceutical company would hire him. His wife left, took their son, said she couldn't be married to a failure. Robert lost his house, his savings, everything, and eventually he ended up here, in the courtyard of the hospital, where doctors who'd once been his colleagues now walked past him like he didn't exist. But he still remembered the formulas, the research, the treatment he'd developed for neuroblastoma 15 years ago. The treatment the company had buried because it wasn't profitable enough. And he'd been watching Sarah, watching her walk through the courtyard every day at lunch, watching her face grow more tired, more desperate, watching her cry on the bench when she thought no one was looking. He knew what she was facing, and he knew he could help. The question was whether she'd let him. It was a Thursday afternoon when Sarah finally broke. She'd just come from a meeting with Lily's oncology team. They'd run out of options, suggested hospice care, talked about making Lily comfortable, about quality of life in her remaining time. Sarah had nodded, thanked them, then walked out of the hospital and kept walking until she reached the courtyard. She sat on a bench and put her face in her hands. She didn't cry. She was too exhausted to cry. Dr. Mitchell. The voice came from her left. Sarah looked up. The homeless man was standing a few feet away. She'd seen him before, dozens of times, never really looked at him. "I'm sorry," Sarah said automatically. "I don't have any cash." "I don't want money," the man said. "I want to help your daughter." Sarah stared at him. "What?" "Lily. 9 years old. Neuroblastoma. Stage 4. Resistant to platinum-based chemotherapy." The man's voice was calm, clinical. "You have maybe 3 weeks left. Maybe 4 if you're lucky." Sarah's breath caught. "How do you know that?" "Because I've been watching. And because I treated the same cancer 15 years ago." "You're a doctor." "I was." The man sat down on the bench, not too close. "Dr. Robert Hayes. I used to work at Helix Pharmaceuticals. I developed a treatment for neuroblastoma. It worked. 73% remission rate in clinical trials. But the company buried it. Too expensive. Not profitable enough." Sarah shook her head. "That's impossible. I would have heard about it." "Not if they didn't want you to." Robert pulled a folded piece of paper from his coat pocket. It was worn, stained, but covered in chemical formulas, molecular structures, detailed notes. "I kept a copy. All these years. I thought maybe someday it would matter again." Sarah took the paper. Her hands were shaking. The formulas were complex, professional, real. But this was insane. This man was homeless, living in a hospital courtyard. How could she possibly trust him? "Why should I believe you?" she asked. "Because you don't have any other choice," Robert said simply. "And because deep down, you know I'm telling the truth." Sarah looked at the paper, then at her hands, then at the hospital behind her where her daughter was lying in a bed, dying, he was right. She didn't have a choice. But what happened next would force her to confront something she'd buried for 15 years. "I know you," Robert said quietly. Sarah's head snapped up. "What? 15 years ago? You were a resident. First year. You were assigned to observe our clinical trials at Helix." Robert's eyes held hers. "You saw the data. You knew the treatment worked. And when the company fired me, you said nothing." The memory hit Sarah like a punch to the chest. She'd been 26, fresh out of medical school, excited to work with a major pharmaceutical company. She'd watched Dr. Hayes's trials, seen the children go into remission, seen the miraculous results, and then she'd watched the company destroy him, watched them call him a fraud, watched them bury the research. She'd known it was wrong. But she'd been young, scared, ambitious. She'd told herself it wasn't her place to get involved, that she couldn't risk her career, that someone else would speak up. No one had. "I'm sorry," Sarah whispered. "I don't need your apology," Robert said. "I need you to decide if you're going to make the same mistake twice. Are you going to stay silent, or are you going to fight?" Sarah looked at the formula in her hands, then at Robert. This man who'd lost everything for trying to do the right thing. This man who was offering her daughter a chance when no one else could. "What do you need?" she asked. Robert smiled. Not a triumphant smile. A tired, relieved smile. "Access to a lab. The compounds are basic. I can synthesize them in a few hours. But I need equipment. The research labs are locked after hours." "I know. That's why I need you." Sarah thought about what she was about to do. Breaking into a hospital lab. Synthesizing an unauthorized drug. Administering experimental treatment without approval. She could lose her license. Face criminal charges. Destroy her career. But Lily was dying, and this was the only chance. "Tonight," Sarah said. "Midnight. Meet me at the south entrance." They worked through the night. Sarah got them into the lab. Robert moved through the space like he'd never left. His hands were steady, precise, every measurement exact, every step calculated. Sarah watched him work and saw the brilliant scientist he'd once been. By dawn, they had it. A clear liquid in a small vial. The culmination of 15 years of lost research. "How do we administer it?" Sarah asked. "For infusion. Slow. Over 6 hours. She'll feel sick at first. Nausea. Fever. That's normal. The compound is targeting the cancer cells, breaking down their resistance to treatment." Robert handed her the vial. "After the first dose, wait 48 hours. Then repeat. 3 doses total." Sarah held the vial up to the light. Her daughter's life was in this small glass container. "What if it doesn't work?" "Then we tried," Robert said. "That's more than most people get." Sarah administered the first dose that morning. Told the nurses it was a new anti-nausea medication. They didn't question her. She was a doctor. They trusted her. Lily's reaction was immediate. High fever. Vomiting. Sarah held her daughter's hand and prayed she hadn't just made a terrible mistake. But then, slowly, the fever broke. Lily fell asleep. And when she woke up 12 hours later, something had changed. "Mom," Lily said, "I'm hungry." She hadn't been hungry in weeks. Sarah ordered scans, tried to stay calm, tried not to hope. But when the results came back 48 hours later, She couldn't believe what she was seeing. The tumors had shrunk. Not by a little. By 40%. Doctor Chen called her into his office. Stared at the scans. What did you do? I don't know, Sarah lied. Maybe the chemo finally kicked in. But she knew. And she knew she had to give Lily the second dose. 0.3 doses over 6 days. Each one brought more improvement. The tumors continued shrinking. Lily's appetite returned. Her energy came back. The blood work showed her immune system recovering. By the end of the second week, the scans showed something impossible. Complete remission. The oncology team was stunned. Called it a miracle. Wanted to study what happened. Sarah deflected. Said she didn't know. Said they should just be grateful. But she knew she owed someone the truth. She found Robert in the courtyard. He was sitting on his usual bench, reading a newspaper someone had left behind. It worked, Sarah said, sitting beside him. Robert looked at her. I know. I've been watching the medical waste. Saw the empty chemo bags stop coming out. Knew that meant something changed. She's in complete remission. They're calling it spontaneous. A miracle. It's not a miracle. It's science. Science that should have saved hundreds of children 15 years ago. Sarah was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, Help me bring it back. The research. The treatment. Let me fix what I should have fixed 15 years ago. Robert shook his head. I'm a homeless man with no credentials. No one will listen to me. Then they'll listen to me. I'll say I developed it. I'll take it through trials. Get it approved. Save other children. You do that. I owe you that much. I owe Lily that much. And I owe all the children who died because I stayed silent. Robert looked at her carefully. It won't be easy. Helix will fight you. They buried this research once. They'll try to bury it again. Let them try. It took 2 years. 2 years of fighting, of clinical trials, of facing down pharmaceutical executives and lawyers. Sarah testified about the treatment. Submitted Robert's original research with his name restored. Fought for approval from the FDA. Helix Pharmaceuticals tried to stop her. Sued her. Tried to discredit the research. But Sarah had something they didn't. Proof. Lily's complete recovery. And eventually, 12 other children who'd been given the treatment in controlled trials. 12 children who went into remission. The drug was approved. Robert's name was restored. An official apology issued. Compensation offered. But Robert didn't want money. He wanted something else. I want to work again, he told Sarah. Not for a company. For patients. Real patients. Sarah smiled. I know a hospital that needs a good biochemist. Robert returned to Children's Memorial. Not as a pharmaceutical executive. As a researcher. Working with Sarah's team. Developing treatments. Saving lives. And every day, he walked past the courtyard where he'd spent 3 years invisible. Forgotten. But where he'd also saved the one life that changed everything. Lily grew up. Graduated high school. Went to medical school. On her first day, she wore a small pin on her coat. It had a single word engraved on it. Remember. Because sometimes the people who save us are the ones we never saw. The ones we walked past. The ones we forgot. And sometimes redemption comes not from being remembered, but from remembering why you started in the first place. Did this story remind you of something? Drop a comment below. Where are you watching from, and how old are you? Don't forget to like and subscribe. See you in the next story.